A lot of games that I have a problem with uh, don't come with, or at the very least, they don't release one shortly, a monster manual, or a bestiary, or a tome of foes, or whatever you'd like to call it. This is Our World, and it's the second installment of the Dresden Files RPG. It is chock full of monsters, but in addition to that, it comes with a little short story at the front of it, which isn't bad, and it comes with a little chapter on kind of expanding the setting of the Dresden Files, but mostly as it pertains to what is going on in the supernatural world right now. So it's a little outdated, but that is fixed with the release of the Paranet papers, which I will get to later. So Our World opens up with a short story. Like I said, it does a decent job of explaining all of the, well, not all of, but it does a good job of introducing new people to the way magic works, to kind of what the supernatural threats might be. It's really pretty good, actually. Not the best short story in front of a RPG ever, but it's pretty good. So then, like I said, we get this chapter. It's called Old World Order. And it starts out with all of the supernatural politics and kind of how everything works together, which you do need to know if you're going to be running in the Dresden Files setting, followed by the different supernatural factions and how they tie together, as well as a few little blurb boxes that can help you out a lot. So it's really decent. It's definitely not too long of a chapter. It also has a little bit on supernatural conflicts that are ongoing in the story at the time this is released, which are really good. They're only like a paragraph or two each. They do a really good job just summarizing it up, and they're plenty enough on their own that you could probably run a little campaign with them. But where the book shines are the next two chapters. The second one, What Goes Bump, is your classic bestiary. It's full of monsters, and unlike a lot of other books that might organize them alphabetically, they're organized by what kind of monster they are, and in turn the categories are organized alphabetically. So, for instance, if you want to use a fairy as an enemy, but you're not sure what kind, you can just open to the section entitled Fairies, and just like the classic monster manual, it has on the top right and top left of the pages, it has what monster it's currently talking about, which is awesome. So you don't need to know a whole lot about these monsters in order to find and use them effectively. Constructs, fairies, dragons, angels, demons, etc. That's awesome. So for anything that's too powerful, anything that's a plot level device, like something that the PCs shouldn't be able to take out, it will not give them stat blocks, but it will give them little suggestions for the kinds of power they might have, which is helpful. Although I kind of wish they had statted them out, but as the old gamer saying goes, once you stat it, they will kill it. As I found out in my Dresden Files game. So any smaller kind of monsters, mortals, whatever, they're going to have a little blue box that has, well, all of their aspects and skills and stresses on it, so that you can use them immediately right out of the book into the game. If you're running this at a table, it's a good idea to kind of have some of these more generic ones written down on an index card or something and ready to go, so that if your players take an unexpected turn, you can just whip that right out. I like to do the same when I run games on Roll20. I'll spend some free time just filling out blank character sheets so that I always have something to use. So right after What Goes Bump, which is a big meaty chapter, we have the biggest and meatiest chapter of this book, which is Who's Who. Now this one is an interesting chapter because it's very similar to the last one, but instead of giving you broad categories, it's again entirely alphabetical, and it's pretty much every named character that has appeared in the Dresden Files given stats. So even people that were just mentioned in passing, people that have only appeared in short stories, all of them. And you don't need to be a fan to enjoy this chapter, just like the last one. This gives you so much to work with that if yourself and your players have not read the Dresden Files series, you can just rip a character right out of this chapter and you'll have an NPC ready to go. If your players are familiar with the setting but you aren't, and you're using a homebrewed setting, you might want to consider just renaming them and maybe altering their aspects a little bit, but that's not too important. Just like in the last one, anyone that is too powerful to defeat by the stats will not be given stats. Although that is very few and far between with these, actually. For the most part, they're all fleshed out, all given stats to use. It's pretty nifty. So before I spend all night just flipping through this looking to prove myself wrong, what I will get to then is the last chapter. Like I said, Who's Who is a massive chapter. But the last chapter is called Occult Chicago. And this is something the Dresden Files RPG does that if they ever do release more books in the future, I hope they continue doing. And that's statting out and fleshing out cities to use as settings. In the Paranet papers, the big one right off the bat was Las Vegas. In our world, it's Occult Chicago. And in your story, it's Baltimore. And it's great. This, first of all, for fans of the series, this can go a long way towards kind of explaining the way Harry Dresden sees Chicago. But for people that haven't, or people who've just picked this up, this gives you a great setting to use that your players might be more comfortable playing in than Baltimore, because more people might know it intimately. More people might have at least heard of. I'm gonna dig myself a hole there. Not heard of it, but be more familiar with it at a passing level. You know what I mean. Right. And just like in the Baltimore chapter, in the last book, they spend an awful lot of time going over all of the details that they can think of in convenient little sections that are all different. And they're all given these themes and threats and faces or NPCs who represent it to use. What I should have gone over earlier but didn't, this is $39.99 US. Your story was $49.99. And it is quite a bit thinner. And by quite a bit, I mean a little over half as thick. Yeah, it's really hard to see there, but it's definitely smaller. You can tell right away. That said, this has more immediate game-relevant information in it than your story does. So while you do need your story to run the game, our world is much more accessible, I feel. It's much easier to use. It's organized a lot better than your story was. And if you're going to be running the game, I think you should pick it up. If not because you're a fan of the series, then at least because it will give you endless creatures and people to work with and work into your game. Thank you very much for watching.